Hello, it's Lou Collins and welcome to Make Me A Cardmaker video 1. So what we're going to be doing today is talking to all of you who have just begun on your card making journey. Maybe you've been watching things like Craft World, for example, reading the magazines, but not quite delved in yet, not sure where to start. We are going to just take the confusion out of any of the terms that you may have read, things like matting and layering, things like, adhesive can cover so many different things. So I'm going to clear all that up for you in this video. And with each video in this series, we're going to actually finish with a card. So you're going to learn at least 2 or 3 different techniques and all the different products based around that as well. So today we're going to be looking at, first and foremost, your card bases. Then we're going to be looking at your adhesive choices. And then we're also going to be looking at matting and layering, which is a technique you'll see come up a lot, particularly in step-by-step written instructions. So shall we start first of all with our card bases? Now for this particular card, I'm going to use what would be known as an 8x8 card base. Now card bases are usually measured in inches, but they can come in 8x8 inches, 7x7 inches, 6x6, 5x5, 4x4. They are your square ones. Then we have 5x7. Obviously that's not square, that's a rectangle, and lots of other 4x6, for example. But then these sizes can also be classed as A5 or A6. If you're in the UK, then American terms, for example, they'll get their different sizes as well. Not to worry too much about the sizes now. I would say for you, just have a look at your card stock, at your folds, at your card blanks, decide which shape and style and size you prefer best, because personally I love a square card and I love something like a 7x7 or an 8x8, but it's complete preference. Your card bases need to be a really good quality cardstock as well, and what we mean by good quality cardstock is the thickness, the weight of the cardstock needs to be strong and sturdy, because this is going to hold your layers or your embellishments and everything on the front, but it still needs to be able to stand upright like so. So you don't of course want to be using a flimsy piece of paper. So I've got a variety of different elements here that would be considered card bases. Some of them you'll find in the shops or online, you'll find as packs of card bases, again different colours, different styles and different sizes, and they are pre-scored, so they've already got the score line down the middle or wherever it may be. This one's a gatefold card. So they're pre-scored, some of them are folded, some are in the pack open like so, and you just have to fold on the scored line. And most of these will come with envelopes that match the size, so you haven't got to think about your envelope. So I've got here, this one looks like a 5x7. We've got a similar size in a gatefold. Then we've got here, this is an A5 when it's folded, so simply an A4 in half. They all come as pre-scored. Then there's card bases as well that are not yet scored, but they are intended to be card bases. So this is a card stock that's around about 350 GSM. So I did mention the strength of the card. Actually, the card bases need to be quite strong. When we talk about card or paper, we talk about GSM, so that's grams per square meter, and that's going to give you an idea of how heavy, how strong your card or your paper is. For a card base, we're going to be looking at around about 200, 250 GSM upwards. Okay, this is probably around about 280 GSM, so I know it's strong enough to be a card base. Anything below about 100, 120 GSM would consider paper. Absolutely, definitely not strong enough for a card base, but perfect for other things on your cards. Now, if you're in America, they don't measure by GSM, they measure by pounds, so LBS, the abbreviation, and you've obviously got an equivalent. It's best if you look on a web search if you want to work out the difference between the two. So I'm going to be working in GSM. This one actually is called an adaptable as well, because it is intended to be a card base. If I was to fold it in half, it would be 6 inches by 6 inches, but it doesn't have a score line in it. And this is why it's called an adaptable. It's for you to put the score line in yourself, whether you want it in the middle or whether you want it, so 2 score lines, to make it into a gatefold, or maybe you want to do some other funky sort of different card shapes, and there's lots of different templates and measurements about to do those. We're just looking at our basic ones today. Or you can just take your cardstock that you've got at home. You don't have to buy pre-made card bases, and you can create your own. This is a cardstock from the company Hunky Dory. It's quite a well-known cardstock called Adorable Scoreable because it scores and folds beautifully without creasing and cracking. It's white on one side, so perfect for your cards. You've got a lovely colour on the other side. This is an A4 sheet, so you could fold this straight into an A5 card base if you wanted to, but then you could trim it down to be smaller. It's entirely up to you. There are no rules when it comes to card bases, and everyone, like I say, has their preference. So today I'm going with an 8 by 8 inch pre-made and pre-scored card base. So I already have the envelope ready to fit this in. Just a side note, if you do make your own card bases, of course you do need to be aware that you're going to need to make your envelopes as well. Now the next stage is matting and layering, and a lot of cards will have matting and layering. So what is it? So this is the technique of layering up mats of cardstock so that they are on the front of your cards, and they don't have to cover the front, but they can be just a section otherwise, and it builds up borders to the card base. So for example, I'm going to do some matting and layering now onto this card. I've chosen 2 colours of cardstock just really to show you and to repeat that matting and layering process, but you can do it with just one and then your embellishments on top if you want to, but I'm going to do 2 just to really sort of embed the technique for you. So I've chosen 2 panels of cardstock that they're at the moment around about the size of my card base to make sure they're big enough. But you could cut these from much larger sheets if you've got A4 sheets, for example. Now I know that this pre-made topper that came with a Papercraft Essentials issue is going to be the main focal point of my card. So what I want to do is to have these mats and layers underneath this panel. So the panel will be the smallest, then we'll have the teal under there a little bit bigger, then we'll have this pink a little bit larger, and they'll all sit on the white card base. So if I just lay these like this and ignoring these 2 bits that I'm covering my hands over, you can see the effect that we're going to get from the mats and layers. Okay, all those borders building up. So we need to measure those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure, first of all, I know my card base is 8 by 8. I am going to measure, and I'm going to do this with a trimmer, my topper. And I've got a lot of trimmers will have an extendable arm, which is what this is, which allows you to measure larger. And very often if you flip your trimmer upside down, you might find an arm that extends out. I'm just going to use this as a ruler. So this topper here is 6 inches across. Okay, so I've got 8 inches by 8 inches, 6 inches by 6 inches. So I need to measure my layers between here to be between 6 and 8 inches. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come with my first one, which needs to be a little bit larger than the 6 by 6. I'm going to put it in my trimmer, and I'm going to do this at 6 and 3/4, this one. And you can do it, it's better to do it a bit larger rather than too small. So I'm going to do it at 6 3/4, have a look at what it looks like, and then I'll trim more off if I need to. So just for this, I was just placing the edge of my cardstock to the number across the top. Once I've got it at the right measurement, I then trimmed it, okay, so, and then twisted it round and did the other side. So that should be a 6 3/4 by 6 3/4 card base there, and perfect. So that sits on top and that sits there. Lovely. Now, while I'm looking at that, I'm thinking that's perfect if I'm just having the one layer, but I want to squeeze another layer underneath, okay. Now, if I want these to be nice and even layers, or the gaps between the layers to be nice and even, I'm not going to be able to get another 3/4 of an inch from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one down to 6.5 inches. So that's just taking 1/4 inch from each edge. It's not a lot. 6.5 by 6.5. Do you see what I mean? It's easier to go smaller than it is to go bigger. Pop that on there. Lovely. So I've gone from 6 to 6.5. So the next one I'm going to do is 7 inches. Okay, to keep that nice gap between all of the layers. So putting this next colour at 7 inches. And again at 7 inches to do both sides. So I've now got a 7x7 square that my teal panel can sit onto nicely, and then my topper. And this doesn't have to be a pre-made topper. It can be one maybe that you've made yourself, something you've stamped, or a patterned piece of paper. And then they should fit beautifully onto the 8x8 card base. That looks lovely. I'm happy with the card base being slightly larger than the layers here because it's a nice bold frame for it. So what I'm going to do next is glue these down. So this is where we come to our adhesive. So there's lots of different choices for your adhesive. So for example, we have our tapes. There's lots of these. I mean, there's different widths of them. There's different makes as well. They're all clear tape. So if I just find the end of this one, it's a clear tape on a paper backing, okay? So the idea is that with the paper backing, certainly you can tear this where you like, and then you'll peel off the backing. Now, just looking at this particular piece, in fact, if I pop it onto a piece of cardstock, you'll see that this one, the backing lifts off really easily, but the tape, if I can just catch the light on the tape there, it's not actually as wide as the backing. The backing is wider and overlaps the actual tape there. So it's very easy to lift this up from. If we come to the next tape here that I've got, again, this one can be torn because it's paper based. Now I pop that, and just sometimes you'll need to burnish your tapes onto your paper. This one's not too bad to get up, but I did need to pick at the edge a little bit just to get under the paper there, because the paper was sort of all over the glue and the glue went edge to edge, so it's not quite as easy. This one here, where the paper overlaps the glue, is called finger lift, and it's always my preference to use finger lift. Another clear double-sided tape that you'll often hear people talk about is red liner tape. So red liner tape is, again, it's clear with a red plastic backing, so you can't tear this. You'll need to use your scissors to cut this, and I would advise keep a pair of scissors just for cutting your tapes and your glues, because you don't want to add adhesive to the scissors that you're going to cut your papers with afterwards. So this is red line tape, and the idea is that the actual adhesive, the sticky part of this, is much thicker and much stronger than the tapes we've seen here on the paper backed pieces or rolls, because this is ideal for gluing things like plastic together. If you're making 3D boxes, this is going to hold much stronger. Okay, so that's your red line tape. And again, red line tape does come in lots of different shapes and sizes. All right, now other tapes are foam tapes. So, and they are exactly as they sound. They're still double-sided. So you've got the sticky on both sides. So there's the sticky underneath. And then once you've stuck it onto your project, you'll have the sticky on top to lift off. But they are a foam rather than a very thin piece of glue. This lifts your layers or your embellishments up a little bit and gives them a little bit of dimension. I'm going to be using some of those in a moment on our card to really show you the depth that you can get with your card then. Other glues would be a wet glue. So this is very much like the PVA, the white craft glue that you used to use when you were at school most likely. Very, very similar. There's lots and lots of different brands, but essentially it's a white wet glue that will dry clear and dry relatively quickly. I decant mine from a large bottle into a smaller bottle that has a fine tip metal nozzle on it to make it much easier to apply to small areas. Okay, now one other glue that I do prefer to use a lot of the time when I've got heavy embellishments like buttons, like paper flowers, is hot glue. Again, there's lots and lots of different hot glue guns on the market, different brands and such. And with these, you've got your sticks that you need to stock up on, but this will last you a very long time. You'll turn it on, it will take a minute or two to warm up, and then you can dispense the warm, wet glue. It is very hot, so you do need to be careful. But this dries in seconds once it's applied to your project, and it remains really quite deep, so you've got that relief to it. So again, you can lift your elements up off your page if you want to. So that's an overview of the basic adhesives that you're likely to come across. There'll be different names for them as well. By all means, always come to us. There's myself, there's Natalie, there's Kate on Craftwell. We can answer any questions for you if you have them. But let's start with the mats and layers. So I'm going to start with the first one. I'm actually going to put down with wet glue. So I've got the fine tip nozzle, and this really does decant a tiny amount, as you can see there, at a time. But I can unscrew, on this particular bottle, I can unscrew the metal part and use it with a slightly larger lid there. So what I tend to do is I go round the edge with my wet glue, not quite to the edge, because as we press this down, the glue's going to squelch out a little bit. Don't want it coming out from the edges. And I do a bit of a squiggle in the middle just to hold the centre down as well. If you're using a good quality card base, you won't see the glue on the other side at all. If you're using a thin paper, you may find that the paper, it actually shows where the glue is on the other side. It kind of does a warped effect. So it's better to use slightly heavier weight papers for large areas like this. So just going to replace my nozzle on there, and I've also got a little cap on the metal lid there. The next layer I'm going to put down with the foam tape. Now foam tape also comes in different colours. As you can see, I've got a black one here. So if I was dealing with really dark colours on my card, I would use my foam tape in black so that you couldn't really see it. If you hold your card to the side and take a look across, you won't be able to see that. Let's go with this one. So I've got wide ones and thin ones, as you can see. I like nice deep foam tapes. So with a foam tape, what I'm going to do is go across the top and the bottom, or the left and the right of a square panel, it doesn't matter. So top and bottom, or left and right. And then I will usually put another one through the center, going in the same direction. Okay, the reason for this is with this foam tape, we're actually lifting this panel up off of the last layer, the mat that we put down. And if we don't put that foam across the middle, this will bow in and out. I mean, you can see it happening there before I've glued it down. But if you've just attached it at the side and don't have that support in the middle, you will get some bowing, and it can make your card look unprofessional. So we want to keep things looking as professional as possible and nice and sturdy and strong. I would just also recommend be wary of how much foam tape you use. So I tend to use it on no more than 2 layers on a card, because if you've got to pop this in the post and you've got 3, 4, 5 layers of this sort of foam tape, you're looking at that starting to become a centimetre or so thick and really heavy, and putting it in the post, you're going to pay more postage for that. So then I've got this. So this, as I say, has come from a magazine kit. This is Papercraft Essentials. This was one of the kits that was in the magazines a few months ago, and this is usually called a topper, a pre-made topper, as is the piece that came out. If it's in a kit like this and you just pop it out, so it's all cut for you and you just pop it out from the sides, they usually call that a die cut topper. Okay, so you don't have to cut it out yourself. And if it's foiled, it's got the gold, or it's got some silver or metallic foiling on it as well, which this has. So this is going to sit there, and again, I'm going to lift that up. Now, for this one, I'm going to just use my wider tape as an example. So you get even more support with the wider tape. But for this one, I can't go across the middle because I've got an aperture there. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tape on each, the top and the bottom there. Can you see I'm just sticking it down, and when I've got it as far as I want it to go, then I cut it. Bear in mind, no one's going to see your adhesive, no one's going to peek underneath your card and see the workings. So you are completely free to put as much or as little on there. Obviously you need it to hold on your card, but don't worry about what the glue looks like underneath, okay? As long as it's going to hold where you need it to. So I tend to put my fingers underneath so that my fingers hit the card base first before the glue, just on the edges there, and I hover it over where I think that mat should go, and when I'm happy, I kind of drag my fingers out of the way so that can fall down in place there. Isn't that beautiful? Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add this sending love on your special day back into the middle. As we work further through these series, we'll talk about things like stamping in there, we'll die cut sentiments and such. But for this one, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple and pop this back in. But rather than putting it in so it sits flush with the top of the card, we're going to put 2 layers of foam on this. Okay, now with this, it's really easy actually to do double layered foam. So what you want to do is measure roughly how much in length you want of the foam, peel it away, kind of double the amount away from your roll, and fold it over so it sticks to itself. All right, then you're going to trim that and then peel off the backing from both the front and the back. And I'm going to repeat that because I want to do 2 sides of the heart. Again, I'm not worried what it looks like, but I am just doubling up really quickly and easily the thickness of the foam tape here. You can also get foam pads also, so already pre-cut pads of foam adhesive, and they are really handy. So with this particular foam tape, I am able to reposition this as I need, which is handy because I did make that a little bit long. There we go. So now I've got double the thickness of foam that this layer has. And when I put that down there, that should sit. And if I just lift this up for you, you can hopefully see that shadow around the edge there. So we've got that gap between the 2 layers, and that just helps it look even more professional. So that is your first card made. There are lots and lots of different techniques there for you to go over, for you to explore and experiment with, and I hope you'll join me for Make Me a Card Maker video 2.